Hamilton comes out onto the racetrack now, and is he going to be ahead of Lando Norris? That's the big key. No, he's not. And there's Max Verstappen right behind Hamilton into the first chicane. Once again, it's wheel to wheel. Hamilton and Verstappen, and this time Verstappen and Hamilton have crashed out, and they are both out.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Undercut podcast. We're back in the nick of time. And I say in the nick of time, I'm technically, or probably as you're listening to this, packing and getting ready to fly to Italy for the Italian Grand Prix. Yes, this is another episode of the podcast where I crow very smugly about going off to watch Formula One live in a foreign country, but that's besides the point. This is a podcast and you want to hear all about the upcoming Grand Prix and our predictions, so we'll crack on with that. And I say we because it is not just I'm joined by Thiemo and Jesse. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. I'm looking forward to Monza, and after the Dutch Grand Prix that we had last weekend, if that's the appetisement, then I'm looking forward to the main course.
Yeah, could be interesting for Italians hoping to enjoy their home Grand Prix, unless those Italians are Max Verstappen fans. But we'll get into that. If you're waiting for us to introduce Ellie Mae Taylor, she is not here because we record this on a Monday, and she
got too many penalty points in her podcast license, and she's just having to sit it out, unfortunately. But she should be back for the Monza review episode.
Yeah, we've had to move Chembol Bassi around, and I can't remember who we've brought in to replace who, but the long and the veiny of it is that Sergio Setecamera is now in her seat. Anyway, we'll move on to what the hell...
He's doing admin, so that's why you're not listening to that's why you can't hear him on this episode.
Yeah, Sergio Setecamera is...
He's here in spirit.
He's currently writing her key takeaways for the Dutch Grand Prix. Anyway, we'll move on to what the hell has happened. And we'll open up with some bad news for Ferrari fans, as they are going to be running a special livery in Monza, or at the very least they're running special race suits, which are sort of white and yellow, and the white is possibly just a white flag of surrender at this point. Honestly, unclear. They released a tweet earlier today with some sort of very dark black and white photographs of Sean and Carlos in white race suits.
Yeah, not sure what it's about, why it's necessary. Yeah, I mean, it's unclear, much like most of their strategy for this year, and last time they had special livery of any kind, it was the 1000th race for Ferrari at Mugello in 2020, and that went swimmingly for... Oh wait, no, it didn't, it went terribly. So, yeah, not entirely. Maybe there's a car that they're trying to promote, which again seems odd for Ferrari, but honestly, it's probably the closest Mick Schumacher is going to get to looking like he's driving in Ferrari, because they'll be pretty much identical on the race suits by the look of things. But not really much else to say on that one. It's just going to be another painful weekend for Ferrari fans, but for a different reason. So, which kind of leads nicely into the second point here, which is that Mick Schumacher has officially left the Ferrari Driver Academy, which, with all the rumours about him joining Alpine for next year, needs more credence to that. I'll circle back to you in a second, Jesse, when I've just finished on this. But interesting that Mick has left, potentially because he doesn't see anything changing in the top at Ferrari anytime soon in terms of driver lineup, and with seeing how they're handling strategy and bungling a championship this year, he may just not want to join them, and he's got a lot of interest in him, supposedly from the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull. So if he does find himself out of a seat for next year, maybe he gets to become a reserve driver for one or more teams there depending, or go to Formula E. But either way, there's renewed interest in him at least, so him leaving Ferrari Driver Academy was a bit sad for people wanting to emulate his father. Not the end of the world, I don't think.
Yeah, certainly not the end of the world for him. There's interest in him outside of the Ferrari Driver Academy. But cycling back to why Ferrari could be running white, I had a bit of a sort of Google, and Alfredo Ferrari, better known as Dino Ferrari, the first son of Enzo Ferrari, born in 1932, which would make this his 90th anniversary. Would have been his 90th birthday this year. Says doing the maths, yes. So potentially they're celebrating that. I don't know. It's a bit of a reach.
A little bit clutching at straws, I suppose, but it is Ferrari, so I can't really rule that out.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of a reason why they're running white race suits and possibly a special livery.
Just surrender, like you said. I think you had that straight off the bat. They're just surrendering, and this is the formal way they can do it. And they thought, what better place to do it than Monza? we won't annoy anyone there if we surrender.
They will be rioting in the streets. Anyway, we'll move on from Ferrari and the Ferrari Driver Academy to a different driver academy and the Alpine Driver Academy. Different rioting, Alpine Driver Academy, which has now provided McLaren with a driver in Oscar Piastri. We obviously heard...
Finally confirmed.
Finally confirmed. We heard it before the Dutch Grand Prix. We just sort of saved the news for the preview episode, otherwise there's very little that goes into these. And yeah, Piastri's off to McLaren, which... mixed feelings on that one still, partly because McLaren isn't doing brilliantly at the moment, but it's a great landmark team to go to.
It's like Jensen Button was saying the other day, it's a bit too early in your career, especially when you're not even in F1 yet, to be making so many enemies. And they had that nice little article out on F1 with Ron Pareto, and as nicely as it was written, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt, surely, because it does seem very course correctionally and deliberate, and let's make everyone stop hating Oscar and McLaren for everything and put the blame back on Alpine, when in reality it's probably they've both got dirty fingers, and it's just not great by either of them. And I think the whole thing has been handled a lot better anyway. And okay, maybe you've got the press to blame a little bit for that, because there's always a juicy story, but it went from just outcry that Oscar wouldn't be on the grid this year to a lot of people not being too bothered about him joining at McLaren of all places. Like, McLaren's normally and historically a brilliant team, maybe turning him into Williams where the rate is going, in terms of its downward spiral, and an exciting driver on Piastri, but you just kind of, maybe when it gets close to the opening race of 23, we'll start to get excited, but at the moment, I'm just over it. To be honest, it's like, cool, we've got another driver, but
Yeah, the news for it's gone on so long, I've sort of lost interest in the story. It's dragged out a little too long, and yeah, Jensen was right in saying it's quite early on in your career to start making, not necessarily enemies, but certainly start sort of crossing names out of your little black book. It's not what you want to be doing, and yeah, it's just odd. And also the way that McLaren went about this, they had a contract signed with him quite early, at a point where they were still pushing Danny Rick to say he was still sort of determined to be with the team for a while.
If it was signed when they claim it was signed, there would have been discussions a few months back, which means they're pretty much coming into the 22 season abandoning Ricciardo, and that you can't really spin that.
No.
Because it just means that you were never going to give him a chance.
Yeah, you can't put any positive spin on that, and I think unfortunately the way it's worked out is it's tainted McLaren a bit in this instance, and they, as much sort of as everyone loves them and everyone's a big sort of Lando Norris fan, everyone likes Danny Rick, you can't help look at McLaren and think, ooh, that was a bit conniving, wasn't it?
It's kind of like they've gone back and watched some of Sky's Race to Perfection series, and they got to the Ron Dennis episode and thought, oh, we should copy him.
Yeah.
We should be a little bit controversial. And then realised a bit, maybe they'll realise a bit later, oh, no, that's not what we meant to do there. We went to do the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's something about it just seems, it's left, you can't think of McLaren without feeling a bit sour, even if you're not the biggest Danny Rick fan, without feeling a bit sour in the mouth about how they've treated him this season and the way they've sort of held things from him, and the fact that he's been sort of like reportedly sort of pouring his heart out in big sort of team-wide meetings saying, look, I'm here to do my best for this team. Meanwhile, days later or hours before, I can't remember the way the timeline works, they're signing a deal with Oscar Piastri to boot this guy out of the team. And
you've got to think as well that for a team where they're making such bold calls so early on in the season, and looking at all the drivers they keep switching around and adding to their wider driver company and other racing series as well, making all these big moves and getting all these sponsors on board as well to make it look like they're doing a really fantastic job, but they've got quite little to show for it, especially this year. I mean, F1 gone, and they're looking like they're going to get beaten by Alpine unless they can pull the thing out sharpish. Extreme E, first season in there, but it's not going as well for them as they would have liked so far. Bit of bad luck, but still. Formula E, they've acquired a team for next year, and they've hired at least one driver for there, but again, it's not a driver we would have thought would have been going there, considering all the other drivers that they do have. So Jury's still out of it there, and IndyCar, the two drivers that are in the championship for them, the best chance they've got is Pato O'Ward, and even then, it doesn't look like it's going to go his way, barring some chaos this Sunday. So it just seems like there's a lot of talk, but not much to back it up with. And so if they are doing what I said earlier, kind of copying Ron Dennis and the controversial approach, at least Ron Dennis had a shitload of championships to back himself up with. I was trying to think of a better way a less sweary way to say that, but there isn't really one.
Yeah.
And he's got kind of the record to back it up, whereas they're instead abandoning so early on in the 22 season the one driver who's been able to win them a race since 2013.
Yeah.
And he's not doing a good enough job for us. He's done what Lando hasn't been able to do, and like we said previously, he could have had a triple header win last year and didn't for a variety of different reasons, and Ricciardo managed to pull off that expert masterclass at Monza. So it's just a bit piss poor.
Yeah, I mean, Lando was close to him in Monza, but equally, had the weather been better, we could have seen a Norris win in Spa. I think that's the other thing. And
yeah, but it's the thing we can do if buts and maybes until the cows come home, but the results at the end of the day are they've had excellent drivers in their cars in 2013, and Ricciardo's the only one who's been able to do anything with it in terms of a race win and getting them that win in from them.
yeah, but then you look at all the other podiums that have come from it as well, and they've all been Lando Norris. So,
but to quote Alonso from a couple of weeks ago, if you're not first, you're last. So it doesn't really matter where you are after that. You don't remember who came second at the 1994 French Grand Prix. I mean, you might because you're a bit of a statistician and a bit of an F1 nerd like that. But the average Joe, if you ask Ellie May that question, she's not going to know the answer probably. She might do because she'll listen to this episode after you message her and tell her to do it. But generally speaking, and you're Googling now, which means you can't remember it.
I can't remember it, but I want to say it was Mansell, I want to say. But here we are.
Even if you're right, you've got someone who's well versed in F1 law and he's struggling to remember. So point is still very much valid.
No, it wasn't.
And he's wrong.
The 72-lap race was won by Michael Schumacher driving a Benetton Ford. It was Schumacher's 6th victory in 7 races. Damon Hill finished second in a Williams Renault. Was Matt Slaver still racing at this point? I don't think he was he? No, it's fucking miles.
That would also mean you're definitely wrong.
Miles off. Where the hell did I get that idea from? Kind of an idiot says Mansell from 1994. Honestly. Anyway.
Being a Ferrari fan's getting contagious. It's affecting his decisions and his memory.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. That's probably a good point to shuffle on quickly from Oscar Piastri joining McLaren. But the thing is, it does still leave a seat open at Alpine. And I've been doing some digging. I've been tapping up some contacts, doing a bit of sniffling around, trying to find out who's in the running for this. Because there seems to be every name under the sun floated for this. And
it's probably just easier to name the drivers that aren't in the running for this. It'd be a shorter list.
Well, it is a relatively short list, actually. The short list is 4 at the moment. One of them is obvious, Pierre Gasly. Then there's 2 more that you might not anticipate. And
so the reason we're not talking about Pierre Gasly is because we did all of that last week.
Oh yeah, we talked about all that last week.
Deep dived into that, so if you missed that, do go back and listen to our thoughts on that.
Yeah. Then there's 2 other drivers, which I know the names of, and then there is a 4th one that I don't know, but I know there is still a potential 4th option that Alpine is considering. I know loads of drivers that 4th seat isn't, and that isn't Drugovich, it isn't Schumacher, which is interesting. It isn't anyone American.
Not surprising.
But the 2 names that I do know are De Vries and Nico Hülkenberg.
Which I'm split on. De Vries, happy. Yes, give him the seat. I would be happy with that. If he can't get into Williams next to Alex Albon, stick him in Alpine. He's a world champion in Formula E and a really good little driver. I mean, Formula 2 champion as well. I think, I can't remember from which year off the top of my head.
2019.
2018. 2019, that's the one.
Where he narrowly beat Nicholas Latifi.
Oh, in his 4th year in the campaign, I might add that.
Yeah.
Latifi doing a record there of, yeah, maybe next year's Latifi's year if he stays.
Takes him 4 years to win.
Second place.
Takes him...
Yes, yeah, but then he's second place in the World Championship.
Oh, true, God.
There's a bold prediction. But yeah,
2024 Latifi World Champ?
With that. No, 2023. 2023. Because then he's going to do a Rosberg and retire. But yeah, De Vries, absolutely happy for that. He deserves a shot. And some people might say, what about Van Dorn? Yes, he had a chance in F1 before, but it was not the best shot in F1. But I also think that it might do him more harm than good to come back to F1, so I think he should go off to IndyCar or something, and he's got nothing left to prove in Formula E as it is, neither of them do, so to see De Vries finally get that shot in F1 after going away and winning another championship and becoming a bona fide world champion in his own right would be great for him to then come in and develop with Alpine. And again, Ocon being a former Mercedes man, be interesting there to see two of them in the same team there and seeing what that's like, and the knowledge that they will both have that they can bring to Alpine to help them develop even further to maybe take it up to try and battle for P3 in the Constructors next year.
Especially given the amount of time we've seen Nick De Vries spending with Toto Wolff over race weekends recently.
Very much bring your son to work.
He has looked like a mini-me. There was a brilliant shot of them earlier, both of them sort of frowning at the screen, both of them with their jumper over their shoulders tied across them. I was like, it's like mini-me from Austin Powers. But anyway, yes, so Nick De Vries is in the running for the Alpine seat, apparently.
I'd be happy with that.
Which does make you question whether or not Latifi's staying at Williams, if De Vries would have intentionally been going to Williams, given the Mercedes links.
It brings up the drivers that weren't in the running, your Schumachers, your Americans, your Ricardos even.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to have a look there and see what happens if they decide they don't want to keep him TV. But talking briefly on Hulkenberg, it's going to be an unpopular opinion, but again, I'm going to reiterate, I can like a driver and still not want something for them because of professional reasons. And for me, this is why I don't want anyone who's been in F1 already to come back into F1 again. Once, with the exception being Ricciardo, if he doesn't get a seat for next year, he's the only exception I will make for
What
this.
about Albon, when he left and came back?
Yeah, you get a free pass when Red Bull screw you over, to be fair. And Alex Albon, we knew there was potential there. The likes of Danny Kvyat, Brendan Hartley, and all the other drivers that have been in that second Red Bull seat and the AlphaTauri Toro Rosso team, they were never going to get there anyway. But Alex Albon was rushed too soon there, so I give him a free pass there. But everyone else, no, you had your chance, and that's harsh maybe because Hulkenberg, he was a very exciting talent when he was coming up, and was really on the cusp of it a few times in F1 with Sauber, I want to say. And I seem to remember Brazil being a very close thing for him on that one, but I can't remember if that was Sauber or not. But F1 is doing too much of this, let's bring back drivers who had an alright career but nothing brilliant. And nothing against Hulkenberg, I love the man, but he doesn't deserve a seat in Formula One. You can't be justifying it, and the same for people like Giovinazzi, like Van Dorn. You can't be bringing them back when you have F2 champions who can't even get a reserve driver role with an F1 team. And when you've got people, as much as we like Yuki, he was third in the championship. You should be coming first or second of England in. That is it. And maybe with Courtney, fair enough there because it's a slightly unknown territory there. So willing to explore that. But in terms of bringing back a driver who had a good few seasons in the team, or in the sport, and who has been back in F1 this year for the first two races, and okay, it was Aston Martin, so it was a bit of a kick in the balls, but still didn't do brilliantly upon his comeback. What makes you think that if you stick him with an Alpine, he's going to do amazing things? Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't think he should get priority over Drogovic or De Vries.
Yeah, I couldn't comment on which sort of race it was close for Hulkenberg for nearly getting that sort of elusive podium, but he's come fourth a lot of times. He's got the skills, he's got the ability to do it, and we saw some good stuff from him in that Racing Point back in 2020 when he sort of deputised.
But it just reiterates what I keep saying: good drivers and great drivers, and you only want great drivers in F1. You can be good, and Hulk's good, but is he great? No.
Potentially we've never seen the greatness because he's always had a tricky chassis. I mean, Force India's,
yeah, but
the
then
old PJ Malia
you're trying to
chassis.
change history, and you're saying if, buts, and maybes again. And as nice as that is, and maybe this is the thing, but then what's he going to do? Alpine next year, they're not going to suddenly win the World Championship. How long do you keep him in that car for? A season?
Yeah.
2 seasons? They're not going to be world champions in 23 or 24, barring major upgrades. So you're just delaying the seat for Jack Doohan then, and buggering De Vries in the meantime.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he did have a year on the sidelines as well. He 2011 he was sidelined as the Force India reserve driver. So I mean, he's already been out of Formula One essentially and come back into a consistent driving seat. And yeah, I don't know. A bit of me wants to see him in a decent car and see what he can do.
Well, then talk to the FIA and the stewards and tell them that Andretti in. Then we can have more seats and then we don't need to be having these arguments.
This is very true. I mean, that Porsche discussion with Red Bull is apparently broken down. So if Porsche really want to come into Formula One,
that's exactly what I said last week. Just bring Porsche in properly and have a team.
Yeah.
Same with Audi. Audi with Hulkenberg in 26. There you go. If you really want it, make it happen.
Porsche Andretti with Hulkenberg, I'd go for that. But yeah, so he's on the list of 4, and then there is the mystery 4th person whom I don't know. I haven't managed to find any sort
Maybe Chadwick.
bold call, and
I might as well say it. It's got as much chance of happening as it doesn't, but I might as well say it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not going to be Americans, which sort of rules out Colton Herta really coming over. It depends whether or not they can get super license points sorted
So
out.
Ricciardo would be the obvious 4th choice for me, to be honest.
He would be, but he was overheard in the paddock talking about taking a year out and coming back in 2024. He was chatting with Sergio Perez.
Overheard by who and who wants to report what and all this kind of stuff. So I would take all of that with a pinch of salt.
It was on video him literally walking to the grid with Sergio Perez saying, "Yeah, I'm probably going to take a year out and come back 2024."
Maybe he knows what he's playing at.
Maybe he knows what he's playing at.
Maybe he knows when he's there. Maybe he's just going to tell Checo that. Checo was probably thinking, I have to take a year out, and then he's in Red Bull for 3 years contract. So
yeah, this is true. We'll see what happens. But anyway, yeah, there's the juicy gossip that we've buried for some reason right in the middle of this with the Alpine news. We'll quickly rattle on to some bits that actually come up ahead of the Italian Grand Prix. Fan favourite Jacques Villeneuve is coming back to drive the Alpine for some reason. I don't think it's an FP1 drive. I think it's just a demonstration.
There's your mysterious 4th seat there.
Yeah, weird one there. Sainz is going to receive some new hybrid elements for his power units with a grid drop expected for those. And speaking of grid drops...
Get ready for more pain. It's going to start early.
Yeah, it's not going to be fun. Unless Ferrari find a way of getting rid of all that blasted downforce that's really making them very draggy down the straights.
Won't matter.
I really hope it does. Yuki Tsunoda is also getting a 10-place grid drop for a seatbelt reprimand, which follows on from his rather torrid Dutch Grand Prix, which neatly sums up all of our news ahead of the Italian Grand Prix. It's been 22 minutes, which makes so far the first section of this podcast as long as our last race preview. Anyway.
That just shows how dull the Dutch Grand Prix was last year.
Yeah, we sort of rattled through that. Anyway, we'll move into previously at the Italian Grand Prix. It also shows how much news we front-loaded into the Belgian Grand Prix review as well. We spread things better this time. You get a more even display of your news.
And you get commentary about it during the episode itself.
Yeah, it's great. Anyway, previously at the Italian Grand Prix, when did we last go there? 2021, but we've been racing at Monza since, and I haven't filled that gap in, but I'm going to assume it was the dawn of time. There were dinosaurs around when we first went to Monza.
1923, I reckon.
You reckon?
Before Formula 1 was even Formula 1.
Let's see. Monza race circuit. So it's Monza type properly circuit. There we go. Monza circuit. We've hosted Formula 1 since 1950. We had a year's absence in 1980. So 1950 through 79 and then 81 through present. But I'm assuming racing has been going on there. I'm seeing numbers 1949. I'm seeing some very early numbers on this list. Yeah. The first track, what did you say?
1923. Well, don't leave us in suspense.
The track was officially opened on the 3rd of September 1922 with the maiden race, the second Italian Grand Prix, held on the 10th September 1922.
That's not bad.
You were close. You were only 1 year out. It doesn't get you a point on Popmaster.
I did better than Ellie May on that guess. She just was way off there.
Yeah. She wasn't even here to guess. So yes, we've been racing in Monza for a good old while though. How did the last time we went there pan out? Quite spicy, according to my notes. It was a sprint weekend. Quali was a straightforward affair with a Mercedes 1-2 with Bottas on pole. Max, who had never finished on the podium in Monza, let alone had finished on the podium there, which is quite unusual considering his highest result in Monza being 5th place in the 2018 Grand Prix. He qualified P3, so this looked like his best chance at setting a new PB actually in the race. Yeah.
About that.
Obviously, Bottas had a grid drop for reasons.
Being Bottas.
Being Bottas, I think it was power unit parts or something. So he started from the back of the grid or somewhere further down, and it was basically Max and Lewis at the front. No, it wasn't.
No, it was. Well, I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, it shows.
It wasn't the McLaren, was it?
No, the McLarens were on the second row. They locked out the second row, I thought.
Maybe it was Perez then.
We should probably do some Googling, let's see.
Kind of forget about Perez.
I don't want to say he's forgettable, but it's Formula 1, that will take me in the right direction. I had to go back a few times.
Thank God for editing.
Thank God for it. We just leave most of this stuff in. It adds to the spice of things. Let's see. Italy 2022, 2021. The grid. So it was Bottas, Hamilton, Verstappen, Norris, Ricciardo at the end of the sprint, at the end of regular qualifying. The sprint saw it Bottas, Verstappen, Ricciardo. Hamilton suffered a bit in the sprint. So there we go. So lining up on the grid at the start of the actual race, Bottas, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Norris, Hamilton, Leclerc, Sainz, Giovinazzi, Perez, Stroll. And Bottas...
It couldn't have been Bottas for the race because he would have been stuck at the back of the grid.
Yeah, Bottas was required to start the race from the back of the grid for exceeding his quota of power unit elements. Pierre Gasly received a 5-place grid penalty for an unscheduled gearbox change. He was also required to start on the back of the grid, exceeding his quota of power unit elements. He was then required to start the race in the pit lane for a new energy store specification. So, pretty torrid start for Pierre Gasly. Anyway, the race. Let's flick back to my notes. The sprint, as it always seems to, panned out badly for Pierre Gasly. He was run wide through Curva Grande, I think by Giovinazzi. Lewis lost a few places at the start, opening up a gap for the McLarens who had qualified well. Danny Rick, in a fit of excellence that was unexpected, came home third with Norris fourth, as we've already mentioned. Bottas, like we said, demoted to back of the grid after exceeding his power unit elements, promoting Max to P1. His chance was now to win an Italian Grand Prix, or at least come home higher than fifth. Behind him were two McLarens acting as a buffer to Lewis in P4. The race started badly for Max as Danny Rick sent it on the brakes and passed him into Rettifilo, while Lewis passed Lando. The pressure was now on. Gio had a bad start, left the track, and this time punted Carlos Sainz on his return instead of Pierre Gasly. Later, pit stop chaos saw the gap between Max and Lewis close up, something that had come to boil when Lewis pitted. As he came out of the pit lane, he squeezed Max on the exit and through turn 1, forcing him wide onto the sausage curbs. Max got air and was catapulted into Lewis, landing on top of him. The halo did its job and both retired from the race, leaving the McLarens to race away at the restart. This would mark Lewis's first retirement in 63 races, his last being the 2018 Austrian Grand Prix. Thiemo, you made some sort of complaintive noise.
It was not as one-sided an affair as you made it out to
I
be.
think
Let's
I
call it
reported...
a racing accident with blame on both sides.
I reported that
It's
quite
caused a
neutrally, I
draw.
think, because he comes out and immediately makes a very aggressive move, but Max doesn't yield.
You're saying that if that was the other way around, Max wouldn't have done exactly the same thing?
I'm not saying Max wouldn't have done exactly the same thing, but I'm expecting at least one of the drivers to have yielded. That's what I was expecting, which
Well,
made...
the two drivers in the heat of battle for a world championship at their level.
Exactly.
After Silverstone.
Exactly, so it's a racing
Not
incident.
unlikely. Very naive of you, Jesse. I expect smarter things from you.
Yeah, so neither...
But then again, I don't need to remind you about that wet race in Spa, do I? What year was that again?
yeah, not 1998, 2000?
We'll let the people in the comments correct you.
Pretty sure it was no... Shit. Which race are we talking about? Because there's loads of wet
Spa
races.
98.
Yeah, it was Spa 98. See, I then changed my mind as well. I got it wrong. Anyway, yes.
Daniel Ricciardo won anyway.
Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo went on to win the race, narrowly ahead of Lando Norris, who looked faster on track. This would be the Woking outfit's first win since the 2012 Brazilian Grand Prix with Jenson Button, and Ricciardo's first win since the 2018 Monaco Grand Prix. Equally with Norris in P2, this marked the team's first 1-2 since Canada 2010 with Lewis and Jenson. Bottas somehow rounded out the podium despite having started from somewhere near the back of the field. So kudos there.
Bottas things.
Just Bottas things. Equally, senior sub Robert Kubica brought Kimi Raikkonen's Alfa Romeo home in 14th place, earning him P20 in the standings, ahead of he who shall not be named. Which is quite impressive.
I didn't know Lord Voldemort raced in Formula 1 last
He
year.
did, but was outpaced by Robert Kubica, who only raced in 2 races of the season, yet still somehow outscored him.
That's just talent for you.
That's the raw talent of Robert Kubica, a man who very nearly had a world championship. So the question is, who does it?
Like Felipe Massa.
Felipe Massa had a world championship for about 15 seconds. The question is...
That's as close as Ferrari going to get anytime soon, I reckon.
Too soon, Thiemo. So the question is, who does the track favour historically? We'll be working with stats from 2000 until present, as after 1999 they tweaked Variante Rettifilio from being a 3-corner sequence to being a 2-corner sequence. So out of the prior 22 runnings, Lewis has 5 wins, Schumacher Senior has 3, as do Barrichello and Vettel. Montoya and Alonso have 2, Rosberg, Leclerc, Gasly and Ricciardo have 1 each. Constructors-wise, it's 7 wins for Ferrari, 5 for Mercedes, 4 for McLaren Mercedes, 2 for Red Bull and Red Bull Renault, 2 for AlphaTauri, and although one of those was as Toro Rosso, and 1 for Williams BMW and 1 for Brawn. So it's a very muddled array of stats actually, but I've beautiful minded my way through it and I have no idea what to predict. The 2 previous races have spat out unforeseen winners. 2019 was the last typical race and Charles won for Ferrari. That year,
but even then, we wouldn't have necessarily thought that was a given thing at the time.
Not particularly.
He won in Spa, but that was hard fought in some ways. In Monza, after it was still a Mercedes dominant year, so it was just this weird Ferrari blip for 3 races in a row in the middle, and then went back to business as usual.
Yeah, I think Vettel won a few weeks later in Singapore though in 2019.
Singapore,
yeah,
because Ferrari decided that he should win a race and Bogo Charles' strategy.
Yeah. But I think
practice for later years.
Equally, 2019, this was Ferrari when they had that hypercharged engine that was guzzling through fuel, but didn't matter because it was so quick, it was untouchable on the straights, and that sort of played into their advantage, especially Spa and Monza, 2 very power-hungry circuits. There's little suggests they won't have a stronger setup this time out. So if I were to put money on it, I'm not going to. Honestly, I haven't a clue what to predict. With
you need that money so when you can buy some very expensive tissues at the track to wipe away the tears from the terrible disappointment.
Drown my sorrows with a trackside beer, I think. So the question is, what weather can we expect, or what weather, more importantly, can I expect at the trackside? So I'll just give a final refresh of the tab that I have open for weather forecasting.
I predict it to be sunny, except for where you are, where there'll be a little cloud following you in place and it just rains on you the entire time. A bit like Mario Kart.
Oh, it's the weather's updated. Okay, so...
Am I right?
No, not really. It's supposed to be pretty stormy in Italy at the moment. Storms all the way through Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. Friday's looking better with chances of showers. Saturday's looking overcast but dry. And then Sunday, 60% chance of rain through the day, it's looking like. Yes, so for Sunday it's saying times of clouds and sun with a couple of showers. 2.9 millimetres of precipitation in the form of rain, 46% cloud cover, 60% chance of rain and 12% chance of thunderstorms. So it could be a wet race.
Bum, 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 bum.
And equally, if it is stormy, I'm camping, so hopefully my tent works like a Faraday cage and doesn't fry me or something.
I was just going to say, hopefully it doesn't leak for you.
Or leak, because that's going to be even
Never
worse.
mind a wet race. Jesse's going to have a wet race of his own, trying to get the hell out of that tent ASAP.
Yeah, I don't want to get soggy and then have to fly with soggy sleeping bags and hold all the way back. Good thing I've actually got more weight in my bags on the way back because of the unique tickets that I ended up purchasing because they were the only ones there. Yeah, because I've got an extra 10 kilos, which is just going to be full of wet. Anyway, we'll move on from what weather we can expect to which on-track battles we should look for. Optimistically, when I wrote this, I was calling it a Ferrari clean sweep, but then I saw how pretty useless they were in Spa, so I think I might change that.
On-track battle should surely include Ferrari versus their strategists.
Yeah, the on-track battle is going to be Ferrari versus themselves, especially considering they're going to be running special suits, which never seems to have a good turnout for the books. And Red Bull's straight line speed is pretty dominating at the moment, so might see a Max Verstappen win, although given his track record around Monza, I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see a Sergio Perez win.
A little bit into Lewis on that side of things, and that he's just ticking off tracks that he's done badly at previously because he's added them to his collection. And he's done that with a few already this year, Baku being the obvious one that comes to mind. So, and Spa as well being done properly this year, because yes, last year technically counted, but it was better this year at least. So maybe this will be the next one.
Yeah, we'll see if he ticks it off, but well, we'll see if we think he's going to tick it off with our predictions. We'll start off with our thoughts on pole position. Thiemo.
I don't think I'll get a point for it, but I'm going to be optimistic on this and this only, and hope that the Italians and Tifosi do for Charles Leclerc what the British do for Lewis Hamilton, and give him that extra bit of pace in the car and his home circuit, or in this case Ferrari's home circuit. So Charles Leclerc for pole.
No, that's not bad. I've gone the other way. I can see something going a bit awry at Ferrari during qualifying, and Carlos Sainz getting pole for some reason, but he'll sort of give the slipstream to Charles, and Charles will whip past him or something. That's my general prediction. But yeah, Carlos Sainz pole. Ellie May's played the sensible card, really. Leaned into the...
Which is unusual to say in the same sentence, Ellie May and sensible, so it's
Yeah.
especially Monza as well. We'd like to be right ourselves, but she probably shouldn't get a point for it.
Yeah, she'll likely get a point for this. It's Max Verstappen is her prediction for pole, which is quite fair given the pace of that Red Bull. And Sergio Perez's qualifying habits, where you come out of a 180-degree turn onto the main straight and not bin it.
I mean, I think every year, for the last few years anyway, someone has gone off at some point of the weekend out of that last corner.
Yeah. I mean, Charles did last year. Not in qualifying, but Charles did last year. Was it last year he did that? Yeah, it was.
No, it was the year before.
Year before that, wasn't it? 2020. Did someone crash there last year?
I'm sure someone did, and if not F3, there was a big crash there as well. I can't remember the name of the driver now. He was driving Campos there. There was a big crash there.
Yeah.
I feel like Kimi might... No, not Kimi. He wasn't there last year. But Giovinazzi maybe.
Possibly. We'll wait and see. Anyway, that's besides the point. So, podiums, please.
I have now been sensible and gone for Max Verstappen for a win. Like I say, he's going to be ticking off another track that he hasn't added to his collection. Lewis Hamilton in second, Carlos Sainz somehow in third, despite the fact that it should be Charles Leclerc, but they inevitably bugger his strategy up, and Carlos, despite his penalty for his PE, manages to claw his way back up onto the podium.
Why have you gone for Lewis Hamilton second? The Mercedes doesn't have that much straight line speed.
No, but Perez will disappear somewhere, and George will be too busy fighting Carlos that Lewis will get the switch during a pit stop, perhaps, and Charles, as I said, will get buggered by Ferrari. So, process of elimination.
Okay, I'll allow it. I've gone for Ferrari 1-2, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, and then George Russell.
You don't want points this season, do you?
I'm an optimist. I never said I'm a realist. Yeah, Charles Leclerc first, Carlos Sainz second, George Russell third, which I feel is more attainable for the Mercedes than second.
We should really get that quote on merch for when the podcast speaker of just the end of the podcast. We're optimists. We should say we're realists.
Yeah, that's wholly the vibe of this podcast. So yeah, there's my idea for podium, and Ellie May has gone again, kind of sensible.
Similar route with me.
Yes.
In terms of first place, saying Max Verstappen. She's gone for Red Bull 1-2, Perez in second, and then Charles Leclerc in third, which will probably be a case of, if Zandvoort didn't go by, Charles will be leading the race and the team come onto the radio and say, yeah, we're looking at third for a race finish. Are you happy with that?
No.
First.
What do you mean, looking at third? Fastest lap. Both you and Ellie May have gone quite sensible again.
Max.
It's like,
Just like you say, the speed of that Red Bull at the moment with him in it, it reminds me of Lewis 2020. It's just untouchable.
yeah, and equally coming down that main straight, it's not a tight turn to come out of, so he'll be able to feed the power on and really get some speed out of it. It's the opposite
If somebody
of...
got a straight with a bit of a slingshot, to have a straight where if you're needing to go past a lapped car or just anyone really, you can just do that pretty damn quickly and easily.
I reckon we're going to see some interesting speeds through the speed trap at the end of the start-finish line. That's going to be
Maybe
interesting.
a new lap record for Monza?
Ooh, depends how nailed down through the Lesmos that Red Bull is, which I wouldn't be surprised at, especially if it's going to be dry. I've gone the opposite to you two. I've gone for Ferrari and I've gone for Charles Leclerc with the fastest lap because, again, optimist, not realist. We'll move straight on to our wild predictions, and yeah, Thiemo, we'll start with you.
I'm going to be a realist and not an optimist here, going off if I'm going to be the opposite of Jesse here. I say that Mick Schumacher finishes higher than a Ferrari. Don't know which one, but I don't think I need to bother with it. I mean, Ellie May was suitably vague with her Aston Martin prediction for the Dutch Grand Prix, and it worked out for her. So
Hey, I've long
I was going
championed
to switch
vague
this for
ones.
something else, but I think this would be a great place for Mick to beat like the older sister team there, and to show that he can, even if it's only 14th and 15th, he can still beat a Ferrari.
I mean, I've long championed slightly vague predictions because they do occasionally pay off.
Such as this one.
Such as this one, which is just 5 retirements. Not going to say who, just 5.
Just to say, does it count if it's Daniel Ricciardo retiring from the sport?
Yeah, 5 retirements this season. from the sport. No, 5 retirements from the race. Not going to specify who, because that has never paid off for me before, and I don't think it ever will. Ellie May's wild prediction is Sergio Perez takes a penalty due to a new power unit.
Which looks quite unlikely because they've already swapped out the one he booped in qualifying for an older one, so they wouldn't get a penalty, and it seems like Monza would be an odd place to do it. Maybe it wouldn't be because you've got more chance of overtaking there than you perhaps do at Singapore and Japan, but at the same time, nah.
It's an odd one.
It's my sound logic.
Yeah, not convinced on that one, which is a pretty decent point to finish on, really, isn't it?
As good as anything, I'd say. I mean, it's Monza. It should be exciting if anything from the last 3 years is anything to go by. So the only person I wouldn't want to be is Daniel Ricciardo, because historically, the last few years, you win the Grand Prix, you retire from it the following year. So
Yeah, or you wouldn't want to be me if my tent leaks.
yeah. It's don't be Ferrari, don't be Daniel Ricciardo, and don't be Jesse. That is the advice we can give you in this podcast.
Pretty sound advice, to be fair.
What terrible disappointment should we end?
Yeah, we should. Thiemo, where can the people find you?
You can find me over on Is It Fast, On The Curbs, the Nigel RX podcast, Alex Rorty, and Instagram.
Very good.
Where can people find yourself?
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and in print in Classic Car Weekly, just in any good newsagents or supermarkets. And for this weekend and this weekend alone, you can find me in Monza in Italy. And if you want to find Ellie May too, she will be back for a later episode of the podcast. You can find her on Instagram, where she writes her key takeaways on the Undercut Podcast's Instagram account. You can also find her over on TikTok, where she has the keys to the podcast's TikTok account and does all the good videos for us there. So that's plenty to keep you occupied. We will see you after the Italian Grand Prix, where I will be bringing you some fresh perspective from the trackside. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.